up, all my fight fans? We are fresh off of UFC 285, where we had Jon Jones becoming the new heavyweight champion of the world. So much has went down since then. I mean, there's a lot more news that we got to break down. News regarding that fight got to break down. There's just a lot that we want to dissect within that fight and that whole event in general. First of all, with Jon Jones becoming the new heavyweight champion of the world, the discussion of GOAT continues to roam around, and a lot of people pretty much seem like Jon Jones is 100% the GOAT. It's solidified, it's done, it's in the books. There's really no argument for George St. Pierre. There's no nothing whatsoever. I am a George St. Pierre fan, and I'm also a Jon Jones fan. You know, I find Jon Jones' career very exciting. You know, he was the youngest champion of the world. He's had more title defenses. I mean, the list goes on and on and on of Jon Jones' accolades. But personally, I'm sorry, I just cannot put him ahead of George St. Pierre. Only the simple fact of the whole steroid allegation. It's not in me. It has nothing to do with any kind of ill will or animosity or any kind of like bad like I just don't like Jon Jones or anything. That has nothing to do with that. I think Jon Jones is one hell of a fighter. I think he's a great fighter. I think he's definitely number 2 greatest of all time for sure. But just being the fact that when it comes to steroids and it comes to that, it's just there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. When you do it, you do it. It's just like, imagine, you know, we have all these great athletes that have shown us how great they are, but then it turns out that some of them, whether it's in football, baseball, basketball, whatever the case may be, they come out with some type of steroid, and it just makes you put their whole career into question. And that's something we don't want to do, but we have no choice but to do that. You know, it does make you wonder. We know when he got caught, but we just do not know when the athlete actually started the whole steroid trial that he was on. We don't know that. You know, we know that he was on it, but we just don't know when it started. We don't even know when it really ended. We know he was being tested regularly, and we know that in certain times he did get test positive in multiple cases. It was not even just one case, it was in multiple cases. So it's just really hard to say, hey, this is the greatest of all time, when he also has some type of steroid allegation on there. Well, not even allegation, it's pure, it's 100% fact. And I understand where other outlets are trying to say, like, well, he got suspended and he did his time, and maybe there were other athletes that were on it as well. And it's true, some of the athletes that he did fight were or fighters I should say, were actually on steroids as well. But then there was also other fighters that he did fight that weren't on it either, or at least never tested positive, or there was no 100% facts that the fighters that he fought, or some of them, were actually on, you know, the juice. And that's something you cannot just say, well, I 100% guarantee everybody's on it. I'm sorry. You're innocent until proven guilty. And unless there's some type of evidence that shows every single one of Jon Jones's opponent was actually on that on something, then okay, I'll say, okay, well, you know what, then hey, he's vindicated. Pretty much everybody else was on it. He pretty much beat him with his skills. But if you don't have that, then you necessarily can't not say that. And I understand it's coming from a lot of people who want Jon Jones to be that number 1, and it sucks that, you know, he has these great skills, he has this great background, he has this great you know, all these great fights, and pretty much dominated through most of his opponents, and constantly left and right just completely demolished these guys. But then again, you see that he has some type of steroids, and you just don't want to believe it. You just don't want to accept it. You don't want to be all like, oh, no. I promise you, even with the steroids or without the steroids, he would have still been good. I'm sorry. It's like a baseball player. Hey, I promise you, without the steroids, he would have hit all those home runs. We don't know that. We don't know that for facts. We don't know that for facts now. And now it goes into question. And I get it. They're like, oh, we don't know that he would have, or we don't know that we would have. But that's not the point. The point is now we are questioning it. We are questioning the very fact that maybe, just maybe, he was on some type of enhancements with some of these fights. Not just one fight, but maybe multiple fights. That's it. We are bringing all this into question, and we cannot do that with George St. Pierre. Now, maybe if Jon Jones goes on this really crazy long run in heavyweight, that he just obviously dominates Cyril Gane, unquestionably one hell of a performance. definitely. But if he does go on this crazy run, then maybe 100% we could do that. You know, he could go against someone like Francis, someone like Stipe, someone like Curtis Blades, Tom Aspinall. The list goes on in the heavyweight division, and maybe he can have this crazy run, maybe. But until then, it's just really hard. It's really hard. You know, I'm not going to go through his list of saying, oh, well, he fought some guys that were not in their prime. No, he fought a lot of guys that were in their prime, maybe before their prime, after the prime. It don't matter. He's fought in multiple fighters, great legends, Hall of Famers. He's fought in so many, especially in his earlier careers. I mean, come on, Machida, Shogun, Rampage, Rashad, you know, Vitor Belfort, you know, Glover Teixeira, the list goes on and on and on. Chael Sonnen, DC, you know, it goes on. It goes on. Yeah, there were some fights that maybe he did lose. Like there was a question about that first Gustafsson fight. There was a question about that Dominic Reyes fight. But he still won. So that's 100%, 100% right there. He has the most title defenses. He has fought in the past of the generation, the present generation, and the future generation. He has done it all. But he has the allegation, or excuse, I keep saying allegations. He has the steroids on his resume. You cannot take it off. Just because you do that time doesn't mean it goes away. Doesn't mean you forget about it. Doesn't mean it's done. It's always going to be there. It's 100%. When you say Jon Jones's name, you talk about his career, you do not leave out that. You just don't. You can't. You can't. Anytime you talk about any kind of athlete, when they do something like that, it has to be attached. It doesn't matter what kind of punishment that you went through, it's still always going to be there because it's always going to be a part of your career. Because again, when it comes to this kind of steroids, when it comes to these type of supplements or enhancers, we just do not know when all this actually happened. And that's the problem. It's not the problem that he took it. It's the problem we don't know when he took it. We don't know how long he's been on it. We don't know what fights he's been on it. Maybe it was just one time. Or maybe it was multiple times. You know, we know when he got caught. We just do not know when it started. And that's where I have a hard time accepting, like, hey, maybe he dominated all these opponents with his pure skills. Or maybe he dominated some of these opponents because of other things. We just do not know. And that's why I have a very difficult time putting Jon Jones ahead of Georges St-Pierre. Because Georges St-Pierre never had any of those allegations. Never have anything. Maybe he had that whole Vaseline incident. And there has been also rumors about him not making weight in that Nick Diaz. I believe that was a possibility as well. But there's all these little things that you're going to always find in all these fighters, sure. But at the end of the day, the guys have multiple title defenses. The guys had wins, a win streak like no other. The guy has literally done something that very few others have done. You look at all the champions. Most of the champions, I say about like a large percent of the champions out there, they lost their belt and they were never ever quite the same. Georges St-Pierre lost once in the earlier career against Matt Hughes. Georges St-Pierre lost earlier in his career, Matt Hughes. That could have straight up, like, you know what, maybe killed his spirit. That could have maybe questioned his whole career and his whole choices that he is making in life, and maybe he doesn't want to do this no more. No, he got back to the drawing board, and what happened? He beat Matt Hughes and became champion. Then what happens is what I was talking about. What happens to most champions? He loses his belt. Yes, maybe it wasn't a 100% MMA GOAT that he lost to, but Matt Serra is still one hell of a dangerous opponent, Hall of Famer for sure. But he wasn't no GOAT. He did lose to him, 100%. And maybe he shouldn't have lost to him because I believe that's why they had him at like the highest I'm drawing the blank of the word right now. It will come back to me. But be that as it may, he did lose. He lost to Matt Serra 100%. Gary, 100% sure, no question about it. But what happens is when champions lose their belt, you look at the champions out there. There's been multiple champions who lost their belt and just were never, ever quite the same. That was not Georges St-Pierre. Georges St-Pierre went back to the drawing board, got better, and became even greater than he was, and dominated Matt Serra. And then went on this long run of domination, beating Matt Hughes again, beating BJ Penn twice, beating Carlos Condit, beating Nick Diaz, maybe not all in this order, but he continued to run through the division like no other, like no one ever seen before. Like Jon Jones too. You know, there was a few other runs in light heavyweight before, but Jon Jones did it like no other. Georges St-Pierre did it like no other. And then again, he leaves the organization for 3 years, maybe even longer, comes back with, and this is something that a lot of people don't mention. They don't want to mention it. They talk about how Michael Bisping was a little bit past his prime. But let's put it this way. You know, what is more impressive? No knock on Jon Jones and Cyril Gane. 100% none. But at the end of the day, he beat number one contender. Not by Jon Jones' choice. That's what the UFC gave in front of him. He beat the number one contender. A guy who has had a couple of good fights here and there. Georges St. Pierre beat an older, but still the champion of the world, Michael Bisping, who was a very dangerous opponent, who still continued to look very dangerous in his career. And he was looking very good in that fight, but he was able to beat him with ulcerative colitis. He had that disease. Georges St. Pierre had that disease in that title fight. A lot of people don't know that, and a lot of people don't recognize that. A lot of people don't say about that. But he did have that in his system when he went in that fight, which is a very, very serious system. It is not like he went in there with a sprain. It is not like he went in there with a twisted ankle. It is not like he went in there with some banged up maybe bruises here and there. No, he went in there with a very, very serious disease. A very serious disease, and still was able to get a win. And that's very impressive. Very impressive to come back from all that time in a new division, just like Jon Jones. New division, yeah, maybe he didn't pack on as much weight, or wasn't super big and super different, sure, but still a totally different division. No tune-up, just like Jon Jones, and went in there and beat the champion. That is why Georges St. Pierre, to me, is still the greatest of all time. I'm sorry. Maybe in the future, Jon Jones could be it. That's just my personal opinion. Because let's face facts, guys. The GOAT talk, the greatest of all time talk, is always 100% an opinion conversation. It is not a fact. You know, you go to anybody else, they're going to debate whether it's Anderson Silva, which is still an argument. There's going to always be Habib argument, Demetrius Johnson, Georges St. Pierre, Jon Jones, and so forth. Even Fedor. People are even talking about Fedor. There's always going to have some type of conversation. There's always going to be people that have their one of their favorite fighters, or the fighters that they feel should be number one. But that's just my personal opinion. Georges St. Pierre is still number one. Still number one on that list. 100% my personal opinion. But guys, I would like to hear what's your opinion. I would like to know who is your number one. Do you still believe or feel that Jon Jones should be number one after his dominating performance over Cyril Gane? Let me know in the comments, guys. Like, subscribe, hit that notification button, and I'll see you guys in the next video.